Hey everyone, my name is Jake, and welcome to the second episode of Off Timin. As we mentioned during our season one finale of Good Timin', we plan on doing a few shows over our summer break where we discuss different music-related topics. And today, on the second and last of those shows, me and Reilly are each going to be sharing and discussing 10 of our personal favorite Beatles solo albums. So, for each of the albums that we share, we're going to talk a bit about why we personally enjoy them so much. And we're also going to share some of our personal favorite tracks from each record. So I think this is going to be a really fun show. Both me and Reilly are huge Beatles fans, as I'm sure many of our regular listeners know from our Beach Boys versus Beatles episodes.
Peace and love. Peace and love.
But we haven't really had the chance to go in depth on the members' solo careers. So I'm interested to hear Reilly's thoughts and see how much we have in common with our selections. So to kick us off, Reilly, do you want to share the first album on your list?
Yeah. I don't have this one. But before I want to do that, I want to say I kind of got into the Beatles solo career way later than I probably should have. I listened to a couple of the songs. I knew My Sweet Lord and My Sweet Lord. That's about it. I was a big George guy when I was in high school, but then I listened to All Things Must Pass, and then I kind of bled into it, and then I just went full into the discography, or at least three of the members. I don't think I've ever listened to a Ringo one besides Ringo's self-titled, which might be a bit biased for a top 10 list on my favorite Beatles solo albums. But if I'm going to be honest, if there's only one on there, it's probably self-titled by Ringo. But that being said, I did a full deep dive my senior year of high school. So I might be a bit biased towards some of those albums more than the others. That being said, my number 10 is actually Ram, which is probably the newest one to enter my list. Because when we first did the idea, had the idea thrown in, we should do a top 10 Beatles album episode, I am doing my top 10 in order from least favorite to most favorite. But Ram was not on that list. In fact, I didn't really listen to it at all. I knew Uncle Albert and Admiral Halsey, but even then, I kind of disliked part of the song. It's grown on me quite a lot. I've seen people say it's the first indie album. I don't know if I'd really go with that, but I can kind of see, I get behind the idea. I know Paul did a lot of indie recording techniques. But that being said, I feel that in some ways this is Paul's most down to earth record. It's his only solo one, truly solo, that's on my list from him. I'm not a big fan of his 80s stuff. I do like Flowers in the Dirt, but that's also with a collaborator. But I feel he's really down to earth. He's not really overreaching with his I guess granny popness. He's really just, because this is when he was living on the farm with Linda and the kids. You can really tell this is a down to earth record. It's kind of his Holland, I guess. And that, if we're bring back the Beach Boys back into this, but I've had it on repeat for a lot. Uncle Albert and Admiral Halsey, I can't pronounce it, is probably the title track. But actually, I gotta look at the tracks because it's actually been a month. I've been working like a fucking dog these past 2 months. Too Many People is pretty good. Heart of the Country is such a sweet song. And Monkberry Moon Delight is definitely a song. But I think I'm starting to warm up to Paul. I don't think it's gonna any of his other stuff that's super granny pop from 80s onwards is gonna grow on me too much. I do like Tug of War. It's pretty good. I'm actually a pretty solid fan of McCartney too. I feel that's another one where he's not being too Paul and he's actually experimenting a bit more. But I really like Ram. It might grow on me a little bit more than it already has, but newest one to enter my list. I gotta love Ram.
All right, so the first album on my ranking, so I'm going chronologically for mine because it was pretty much impossible for me to rank these because my opinion changes constantly on these kinds of things. So I thought, why not just go chronologically? So the first album I want to talk about, All Things Must Pass by George Harrison, 1970. I don't know how much more I can say about this album that hasn't already been said. It's a masterpiece of an album. George is at the top of his game here as a songwriter. Great production and arrangements throughout this album. It's a very spiritual album and very emotionally moving. A lot of these tracks I really connect with on an emotional level. I could list pretty much almost every track on this album as a highlight because I pretty much love nearly the entire thing. But some of my favorites on here, the opener, I'd Have You Anytime, is a really pretty number. I really like this one a lot. My Sweet Lord, one of the greatest songs ever written, in my opinion. One of the best Beatles solo tracks. Just absolutely love it. Just a very spiritual song. And I've heard people say that aren't even religious that say this song almost makes them feel like they are religious or spiritual because it just really unifies people. And I just love it. Wah Wah is a really great track, really guitar driven track, great production on this, really loud and blaring. And I just love it. Isn't It a Pity? Kind of a longer track, but I really like it. Very moving track, very good lyrics. What is Life? Another single from this album, really great track. Let It Down. This one's one of my personal favorites. The production on this is just awesome. Got this really pretty and gorgeous like verse section, and then the chorus is just blaring, and it's just awesome. I love the horns on it. Just an awesome track. One of my favorite George tracks. Beware of Darkness, really beautiful track. All Things Must Pass, the title track, just absolutely sublime. Beautiful production, beautiful lyrics. And then Art of Dying is a cool guitar-driven track, and Hear Me Lord, the closer, at least on the second disc of the album, is a really great track as well. One of my favorite George tracks. There's only a few tracks in here I could do without. I didn't write any down because honestly, there's not really a single track on here that I hate, but there's just a couple I'm not particularly fond of. However, I will say I could do without the Apple Jam. I don't listen to any of that stuff ever. It just doesn't do anything for me. It's to me completely disconnected from the rest of the album. So I try not to really hold that against this album and judging it because I kind of view it as like that's a separate thing. But judging the album from basically the opening track, I'd Have You Anytime, all the way through Hear Me Lord, it's a near flawless album, and it's an album that I absolutely love. So that's my first album on my ranking.
There's a lot to say about that one, but that one is like way up there for me. I'm not even going to tell you where it is. There is a lot to say about that album, but I will say, yeah, it's really a double album. It's not, I know it's one of the great triple albums of all time, but it's Apple Jam doesn't count.
Yeah.
Although even the Apple Jam isn't like so bad. It's just more like background music for me.
Yeah,
it's not like the Wedding album from John Lennon where it's like truly outrageous shit. It's just like a bluesy jam. It's
right.
That is not on my list, but what is Walls and Bridges. This one was kind of a grower for me because there was only a handful of Lennon albums I really liked at first. And when I say handful, I mean two. But then I actually like got into it. And this is like his SNL album, if that makes any sense. It's like very New York, lots of horns, very Elton John based. Whatever Gets You Through the Night is basically the SNL theme song, but I fucking love it. Number 9 Dream is a very sweet song. I like the slide guitar on that. Nobody Loves You When You're Down and Out is very depressing. It reminds me a lot of Imagine, that one, like the album. Oh My Love, that's the song I was thinking of. But other than that, I mean, there's a couple of highlights on here, but it's just a very consistent, solid 70s pop rock album. Nothing too bad to say about it. And the reason I have it above Ram is because of Number 9 Dream and Nobody Loves You When You're Down and Out, which are two huge songs for me. I really love those. And the cover is pretty damn cool.
Yeah, I believe that's artwork that John drew growing up. I'm pretty sure, like when he was young.
It's just a super consistent 70s pop rock album, and Whatever Gets You Through the Night is like a great song. And I can see why this was his first number 1 album in the States. It's very poppy, but it was also kind of like a low point in his life. I almost put Mind Games here. They're pretty much on even ground for me. Lots of highlights on each of them, but also like the rest is super consistent, solid pop rock. But this one over Mind Games just because of a couple more highlights.
Right. It's a very commercial album, but yet it also doesn't sacrifice like musically. Like it's still a very strong musically. A lot of variety on it. I might have more to say about that later. So
what I can say about this one is like, yeah, it's just like there's nothing bad I could say about it. There's not a bad track on here. And there's not a 2-second silent track called like the Newtopian. I was like, dude, this is gonna be such a cool song, and it's like 3 seconds.
Yeah.
But it's just, there's nothing bad on there. I guess it's like the weakest part of the album is the fact that it's just like a bunch of 7 out of 10 songs backed with like 3, 4, 10 out of 10s.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you'll talk more about that one later. So.
All right. So the second album on my list, and again, I'm going chronologically here. So this is not the order I put them in, but these are my top 10. The second album is an album that Reilly already talked about, Ram, by Paul McCartney from 1971. This was Paul's second solo album. And I think this is a really strong effort. I know that it was criticized at the time by critics. They kind of slagged it off and said like, oh, Paul's doing more kind of twee crap compared to what the other Beatles were doing. But personally, I think this is a great album, and critics have really come around on it since then. It's now considered generally one of Paul's best. And I think for good reason, because I think this is a really consistent, strong album. As Reilly mentioned, this is kind of considered an early example of like an indie pop album. It kind of has that home vibe. Do-it-yourself vibe, which I can definitely hear on certain tracks on here, like Ram On. But in terms of some of the highlights, again, there's a lot. But some of the ones that stand out to me, the opener, Too Many People, is a great track, really melodic. I know the lyrics on this one supposedly upset John because I think he viewed them as they were coming after him. Also, I know the track Three Legs was also kind of a dig at the other Beatles, supposedly. But I think that Too Many People is a great track. Ram On is a pretty simple track, but really pretty. I love the acoustic guitar playing on it. Really nice track. One of my favorites on the album. Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey. This was a big hit single from this album, and I really like it a lot. It's one of those multi-part songs that we've seen Paul do on other examples, like on Band on the Run. And I think this song is really done well. I can see why it's a little bit divisive among fans because it's kind of Paul kind of treading the edge of granny pop a little bit. You got like the horn section going, like the do 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 do, and then you at the one part he's singing kind of funny with like this fake British accent, like the butter pie part.
I can hate that part.
I love the Hands Across the Water section. That gets stuck in my head all the time. It's just a really well-written song. So regardless of whether or not you like it, I do think that it's a strong effort from Paul, at least musically. Heart of the Country, as Reilly mentioned, really pretty acoustic ballad. Like this one a lot. Very simple, carefree lyrics. Monkberry Moon Delight. I know, Reilly, you just called this a song, but it's actually one of my favorite Paul solo tracks. I think.
I like it. It's just definitely Paul.
Yeah. I love his vocal on this, just absolutely shredding it. The lyrics are goofy and kind of whimsical, but I think that adds to the charm of the track. And yeah, it's just one of Paul's best vocal performances. I just think it's absolutely awesome. He sings the hell out of it. So great track. Backseat of My Car, the closing track on here, is a really beautiful ballad. This one's it has a very kind of Brian Wilson sound in the songwriting. I can kind of hear the Beach Boys influence on this for sure. It's just really well produced. It's a really well produced track. And it's one of my favorites on the album as well. So, in terms of the lowlights on here, the only track I don't really care for at all is Long Haired Lady. And that's because it's a little too long. I think it goes on for like over 5 minutes, which I don't think it needs to for what it is. And Three Legs, the track Three Legs, that track's just okay, in my opinion. But overall, this is a really consistent album. I do think it's one of Paul's best, and it's definitely one that I would recommend checking out if you're new to the Beatles solo discography. So that's the second album on my list, Ram.
Yeah, there's also I don't know if it was a single or like a bonus track, but Another Day is also pretty solid. I like that one too.
That was a standalone single, and that's a really great track. I love that one.
Shows you how much I know about Paul's solo career.
That's a
that
great
being
song.
said, I bet you were shocked that I actually had Ram on my list.
A little bit. I wouldn't say I was shocked, but I wouldn't have bet it being on there either. So I'm glad to see you like it.
It was certainly a grower on me. I had to force myself to listen to it at first. Yeah. And I was like, actually, this shit is not that bad. Next up, in my number 8 spot, I have 33 1/3. This one is always one I see in record stores, but I just never buy it. And then I saw it today, and I'm like, well, I'm already getting Walls and Bridges. It's like, do I really need this? And now I wish I got it. Again, it's another like mid 70s like pop rock album. But that being said, I feel like going from Walls and Bridges to this is where like the step up really begins for me, where it's like this is like stuff that is actually great. There's just a bunch of great pop songs, and they're very George Harrison sounding pop songs too. Woman Don't You Cry For Me is such a funky song. Beautiful Girl is a very pretty song. This song is awesome. I know he's coming off like the legal issues with My Sweet Lord. And I feel like it's a really cool dig at it, but at the same time, it's just a catchy song on its own. True Love is very pretty. Cracker Box Palace is like the most George Harrison song you'll ever listen to. And Learning How to Love You is also really pretty. There's just a lot of like pretty songs, and is very fun album. I love it. The cover is so 70s. I love him with his perm and the glasses. And I don't know. I feel like this is just a really underrated effort from George that never really gets talked about. I would have probably put George Harrison 79 here, but I've known this one a bit longer, and 79 still has to grow on me. So sorry for anybody who wants that on my list. Just not.
I would give some of my thoughts on that album, but I think I have more to say about it later, so I'm going to hold on.
I know you do.
All right, so the third album on my list, we're going to another album from 1971, and this is Imagine by John Lennon. So this was John's second solo album, and kind of like Ram, I think that this is a really strong second effort. It has great production and really great playing on this album. I know George Harrison plays some guitar on multiple tracks on this album, and also just a really great cast of musicians that John employed for this. Some of the highlights: Imagine, the title track, is just beautiful. It's John's signature song. I know some people have grown tired of it because they've heard it 24/7, but it's a beautiful track. and beautiful lyrics. So great song there. Crippled Inside is a fun and upbeat sounding track with kind of downbeat lyrics, but I kind of like that contrast there. So I think that's a fun track. Jealous Guy is a really beautiful and moving ballad. One of John's best ballads, in my opinion. Really honest and vulnerable lyrics, which I really like. Give Me Some Truth is a great track. Some really cool slide guitar on this one from George Harrison. And the lyrics on this one kind of target politicians and different issues at the time, which I think is interesting. Oh My Love, beautiful love ballad. Very underrated track. I know George Harrison played guitar on this one as well. It's just a beautiful love ballad, and I just really like this one a lot. How Do You Sleep is a track I used to not care for a long time, but it has grown on me. I think the production on it is pretty cool, and the lyrics are obviously pretty bitter because they're attacking Paul. But I do think it's a cool track, and it has grown on me quite a bit. And then lastly, How is a pretty ballad. I like the middle eight section on this one. And Oh Yoko is a fun and upbeat closer that he wrote for Yoko. So this is a pretty strong album. There's a couple tracks I'm not particularly fond of. It's So Hard and I Don't Want to Be a Soldier Mama don't really do much for me. But outside of those two, I really enjoy this album a lot. I think some of John's strongest solo material is on here. And it's definitely an album that I'd recommend checking out if you're looking to get into John's solo career. This would be one of the first ones I would recommend listening to. So that's the third album on my list, Imagine.
I've got a lot to say about that one. I sure do. I sure do have a lot to say about Imagine. But I'm not talking about Imagine. I am talking about Wings at the Speed of Sound. So I'm kind of cheating with this one because like some of these songs aren't even by Paul. But I feel like Paul's somebody similar to Brian Wilson, where he really strives with another collaborator or other like people around him. If he does something strictly on his own, it's just going to turn into that one album with the feet on the cover. And like my favorite songs on here aren't even by Paul, but it is a Wings record. It is, I guess, technically like a Paul project. So I almost didn't put it this high. I was like, no, fuck it. I love this one. That being said, the Paul stuff that is like overtly Paul for, I don't know, like silly love songs are still bangers. I still love them. And I think I kind of said before, like most of the Paul, like I guess granny pop, in your face poppy songs are like really hit or miss with me. And it really comes down to production. And I love the bass. I love like how like in your face it is. It's like super self-aware, so I can really get behind it. Silly Love Songs is a fucking banger. She's My Baby is also pretty solid. Let 'Em In is a great opener. But my favorite songs on here are Wino Junko and Time to Hide by Denny Lane and Jimmy McCullough. Yeah. Those are both incredible songs. And like I said, I feel like Paul strives when he has those people around him. It really makes the record so good. And I feel like Denny Lane was a great collaborator for Paul. I feel like he really, maybe not in the same way where John was like purely like another songwriter, but Denny Lane was kind of like his Robin, I guess, and to Paul's Batman, where like they really work well with each other. And they, especially when like some of these songs that performed live are way better. And I'm sure you and I will both talk about the live songs. But I really love this one. I love the bluesiness of it. And I also love the bass on this record is incredible. I fucking love it. In many ways, I think this is Paul's this is the best Wings album, but it is not the best Paul album. And I will get to that one next.
Yeah, so that album is not on my list, but so since it's not, I will share a few of my own comments on that. First, the guitar solo on Wino Junko freaking rips. Jimmy McCullough, awesome solo, awesome guitarist, and he really, I feel like, elevated Wings' sound for sure. Gave him much more of that rock and roll band sound, which I really like. I think the production on Speed of Sound is really good. I think some of the songs aren't necessarily the strongest, but I think they're elevated by the production. Also, Cook of the House is one of the worst things to be featured on a Beatles solo album. So that, I don't know why that made the album, but yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about that album. So I might give some more thoughts later. So the next album on my list, this is the fourth album I'll be talking about, is Living in the Material World by George Harrison from 1973. So this was George's follow-up to All Things Must Pass. And unfortunately, this album, I feel, kind of gets overshadowed by that album as a result of that. But overall, I think this is a really strong effort as well. It kind of carries on the themes of All Things Must Pass with the spiritual lyrics. The songwriting on here, I think, is really great from George. I think the production is great. And I love George's guitar work throughout this album as well. And I would also say that it's a more stripped back sound compared to All Things Must Pass. All Things Must Pass, you had that really heavy Phil Spector production, whereas this album has a more kind of laid back sound to it. and more peaceful sound. But overall, really strong album. Some of the highlights for me, "Give Me Love" is one of my favorite George songs, one of my favorite Beatles solo songs, period. I think it's just absolutely beautiful. I love the lyrics. I love the melody. I think it's a really great track. "The Light That Has Lighted the World" is a beautiful ballad, beautiful piano-based ballad. I love George's guitar playing on this one as well. It's one of my favorite tracks from this album. "Don't Let Me Wait Too Long" is a really upbeat and catchy song. I really like this one as well. Great lyrics. Just a really great song. "Who Can See It," "Be Here Now," and "That Is All." These are all beautiful ballads that I really love. These are also songs I kind of feel an emotional connection with when I listen to them. They're kind of those songs that you put on headphones and they kind of take you somewhere else, you know, and I just think that they're really pretty. I love them a lot. Then, of course, the title track, "Living in the Material World," is a really great track as well. So this album, it doesn't quite reach the heights of "All Things Must Pass," in my opinion, but overall, it's really consistent. And I do think it's one of George's best solo efforts. So that's the fourth album on my list, "Living in the Material World."
Yeah, it's not on mine, but it is pretty solid. I feel like it retreads a lot of the same stuff that made
Yeah.
how did I forget it?
All
That
things
first one he did. All Things Must Pass. All Things Must Pass. He kind of retreaded a lot of the same ideas on it. I feel like he was just kind of doing that part too. That being said, it's still really good. "Be Here Now" is a really pretty song. "Give Me Love" is the best song on the album, without a doubt, for me. "Try Some, Buy Some's pretty good. I'm pretty sure Ronnie Lane did a version of that song with him, and I think I like that one better. Or not Ronnie Lane, Ronnie Wood.
Which one was the one that Ronnie Spector was originally going to sing on that album? There's a track on there that, okay, I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, we'll have to. Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of this stuff, it's good, but I can't, besides "Give Me Love" and "Be Here Now," I can't really pick a standout. And what makes "All Things Must Pass," and I will get to it, but I'm going to say this now, what makes "All Things Must Pass" such a good album is even you can't pick a highlight, but you still know the name of every song on that album. With this one, I can pick a highlight, and the rest, they kind of just blend together, even though they're all really good. So, like, it's good. I really like it. And it was a great second effort by George, but it's like "All Things Must Pass" is like biblical levels of good.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say, like, as pretty as the ballads are, they are a little harder to distinguish from each other. Whereas on "All Things Must Pass," like, each song is like, it stands apart. You know, each song has a very unique characteristic to it that makes it great. So again, I don't think it's quite as strong, for sure. And I can kind of see where you're coming from with, like, it's kind of "All Things Must Pass" part two. But I still think it's really strong. So,
oh, it is really strong. And like I said, like, "All Things Must Pass," it doesn't, like, each song stands its own. You remember exactly what that song sounds like in your head. But at the same time, there's not a highlight because each song is so fucking good.
Right.
But again, I have a lot to say on that album, and I will get to it when I get to it. My next one is another Paul record, and it's also another Wings record, and it's "Band on the Run." This is like an easy one. Wings, at the Speed of Sound might be my favorite Wings record, but this is probably my favorite Paul McCartney and Wings record. Like, it's just incredible songwriting from Paul. Like, I can't, as much as I shit on Paul McCartney, this is one where it's just good song after good song after good song. And similarly to what I said about "All Things Must Pass," like, I remember each of the, like, the highlights or my favorite parts of each song. Like, "Band on the Run" is one I've heard on the radio a lot with my dad. Same with "Jet." But "Bluebird's" really cool. I like the guitar on that one. "Mrs. Vanderbilt," definitely Paul, but it's still pretty solid. "Picasso's Last Words" is a really, like, oddly intense song from Paul. Although I might be misremembering. No, I don't think I am. And 1985 is just a fucking banger. I love that song. Just a great record. Great songwriting from Paul.
Well, that's the next album on my list as well. So I'll kind of echo your thoughts. This album was kind of Paul's first solo album to get, like, I know he had commercial success with albums like Ram, but this album was the first one to get the critical success as well. The critics really like this one, and I think for good reason, because I think it's a really strong album. Interestingly, most of this album was recorded in Nigeria. And if you read a little bit about that, it was kind of a very stressful time because, like, there were a lot of different issues that they had. Paul was, I think, held up at, I think, either gunpoint or knife point at one point, just trying to get to the studio, which is pretty wild. But overall, the album that they produced from all that chaos is a really great album. As you mentioned, "Band on the Run" and "Jet," those are two really popular songs, but they're both really great. "Band on the Run," another one of those multi-part songs were split into sections, but it works really, really well. You can see why this is one of Paul's most beloved solo songs. And "Jet" is a great rocker. great riff, and just a really high energy track. As you mentioned, Reilly, Bluebird is a really pretty track. I remember this one actually kind of used to get on my nerves.
Yeah.
I thought it was a little repetitive with the I'm a bluebird, I'm a bluebird. But it has grown on me quite a bit. I do like it now. And I also like the live version on Wings Over America. Mrs. Vanderbilt is a really catchy song. Like you said, it's very Paul, but I think it has a great melody, and I kind of like the lyrics as well, kind of fun lyrics. Let Me Roll It is a great track that sounds very like Lennon-esque, kind of sounds like what Lennon was doing at that time in terms of production. It's maybe a little long for my liking, but I do still think it's a good track. No Words is a really great underrated track that was written by Paul and Denny Lane. I really like this one a lot. It's kind of my vote for the most underrated track on this album. I think it's really great. Then the closer, 1985. What a way to close the album. This song just rocks. I love the piano riff. The production is awesome, and I really love those slow harmony parts where the song slows down and you hear that beautiful vocal blend, I believe, of Paul, Linda, and Denny, and then the song launches back into that awesome piano part. So this is just a great album closer, and this album, I wouldn't say it's perfect. I think that there's a couple tracks I'm not particularly fond of. Mamunia doesn't really do much for me. I could kind of do without it. It's fine, but it's not a track I ever choose to put on. And Picasso's Last Words, it's too long in my opinion. The track goes about 6 minutes, and I just don't think the track justifies that runtime. But overall, I think it's a solid album. I can see why this was the album that kind of launched Paul commercially and critically as a solo artist. And I think it's a great album. So that's my thoughts on Band on the Run.
Yep, and I have no more Paul records on my list. Yeah, but it is a really great album, and it was like this and Wings at the Speed of Sound were like the only Paul records I listened to for the longest time. It's really hard for me to argue against just generally great songwriting. And as for Picasso's Last Words, it's like I agree. I mean, I think Paul can do long songs, but I don't think that's like his strong suit. I feel like he comes up with great melodies, and when you stretch those melodies out to like 6-7 minutes, it kind of gets hard to keep that like momentum going compared to a song that's like 2.5 to 4 minutes from him.
Yeah. I feel like Picasso's Last Words, like, you know, like the drink to me, drink to my health. Like once you hear it a couple times, like, okay, like, you know, that's the song, and it just keeps going. So I don't know. I just think they could have cut a few minutes off that one.
Yeah. 1985, holy shit, that song is so fucking good. I love it.
It's so good. It's such a great
song. The piano
song.
riff is like, see, that's the intensity I want from Paul when it comes to like a groove. Dun, 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 dun. And then the vocal delivery on that one is like fucking incredible.
I just can't get enough of that sweet stuff, man. Yeah, great vocal.
That being said, I think 1985 could be stretched to 7 minutes if done right.
Yeah, what they should have did was snip off a few minutes from Picasso's Last Words and put that on to 1985. Because
give me a guitar solo, give me like a groove, give me a jam on that one. They did that live with Wings Over America, right?
Which one? 1985?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't think it was on there, because if it was, I would remember having it saved to like my playlist. I don't think they might have did it on that tour, but I'm not sure if it's on Wings Over America, the album. I don't think
they have Picasso's Last Words, but I don't see 1985.
That's inexcusable.
We got to find the bootleg version of that song. Must have ripped live.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure it did. Yeah.
All right. My next one is the first Beatles solo album that I truly fell in love with, and it's quite an odd choice looking back. It's this one.
So, that cover.
To think that I used to fucking love that cover. That cover was like my favorite thing ever. And that's why this is the first record I ever bought. I was like, I want that cover in my room. And looking back, wow. But you would think George Harrison really wouldn't mesh well with the 80s. Come on, this is my 5th favorite Beatles solo album. Actually, it's my 5th. It's my 5th favorite Beatles solo album. Oh my god. But I feel like the songwriting here is incredible. What George really strives with is lots of time to stretch out and work on his songs. When you have him rush out an album, you'll end up with like the 1975 one, and then Gone Tropo, or whatever the hell that's called. You can't rush him on his work, and I feel like that's why this album is as strong as it is. I really like the guitar tones on this. They sound great. I know Eric Clapton's on this one. You also have Ringo on this one. Jeff Lynne was a big help with it. I really did think that him and George were great collaborators. Cloud 9 is a great bluesy track. Fish in the Sand is so unnecessarily catchy for a song with that name. This Is Love is super pretty. When We Was Fab is a great look on the Beatles' career as a whole, and it's finally him accepting that part of his life because for the longest time he wanted nothing to do with it. Devil's Radio is another unnecessarily catchy song. Someplace Else is super pretty. I really like the guitar on that one. I think shows George could write a really good ballad. Wreck of the Hesperus, another unnecessarily catchy song.
Yeah.
Breath Away from Heaven is a sweet song, but I could go without it. It's still very pretty though. I just never want to return to. And Got My Mind Set on You is arguably one of the greatest cover songs ever written, or not written, ever done. So super strong album from him. Super bad cover, but a super strong album from him. And I'm surprised that this one doesn't get the praise that I feel like it deserves because George could write great pop rock when given the chance.
Yeah, that album's an example of don't judge a book by its cover because that album cover is not representative of the quality of music inside. But it is a fun cover. I like George kind of wearing his sunglasses, and but it does look like a Photoshop job done in like 2 minutes.
Right. Yeah, it's again. I feel like because you look at the cover and you're like, oh, this is a bad Beatles solo album done in the '80s, and then you actually listen to it, and it's like, no, this is pretty good shit.
Right, and in a way. It's funny, I said that it doesn't represent the quality of the music, but it does represent the vibe of the music because it's kind of a cover, and that's what that album really is. It's a lot of really fun, commercial, but strong pop songs, and I think it's a great. So.
It's kind of like his Beach Boys '85. It's like you could definitely tell it's from the '80s, but like it's strong pop music from George. It's unusually hooky from him. Because usually I don't really go to George for hooks and songs, but like I can remember Devil's Radio, and then I'm kind of glad. I feel like this is him kind of accepting, like, yeah, I'm a 40-year-old Beatle. Let's make a pop album, and then he just absolutely rips. And the tour that came after this one with George and Eric Clapton was also pretty cool. I like listening to that. And again, Jeff Lynne is great. And then after this, I feel like this is him like accepting. This is like your uncle making an album. Really, like that's how I think about it. And then after this with Traveling Wilburys, I think this is a very fun, poppy, great era for George in general. So,
all right. So album number 6 on my list. I'm talking about another one that Reilly has already discussed. Walls and Bridges from John Lennon. This is a really underrated album in my opinion. Most people, when they talk about John's solo career, they're talking about Plastic Ono Band, which again is a great album. But they're talking about Plastic Ono Band, Imagine, even like Mind Games. I feel like comes to mind first before this album for a lot of people. And I think that's a shame because I think this is a really great record. As I think Reilly mentioned, this was recorded during kind of an interesting period in John's life. It's considered his lost weekend when he was separated from Yoko, when he was living in LA with May Pang. But this album itself was recorded in New York. And overall, I think this is a really well-produced album. I think each track really sounds really good. John obviously had a really great cast of musicians playing with him on this. And I just think it's really well-produced. So some of the highlights on here, the opener, Going Down on Love, is a really cool track. I think it's a strong way to open the album.
Going Down on Love.
Going Down on Love, yeah. What? Shut up. No, stop. Jesus Christ. Whatever Gets You Through the Night, as Reilly mentioned, this is a really fun and catchy song. I can see why it was a #1 hit single. Features Elton John on it as well. And yeah, it's just a really catchy, upbeat track. Old Dirt Road, this is a really beautiful track. One of the highlights of the album, in my opinion. And it was co-written with Harry Nilsson, who became kind of a collaborator of John's around this time. I know that John also contributed to Harry Nilsson's album Pussycats around this time. Bless You is another really pretty song. This one kind of has a very like spiritual sound with the instrumentation, and I really like it a lot. Very chill vibe to it. Number 9, Dream, one of my all-time favorite songs by John. Beautiful melody. I love the slide guitar on it, as Reilly mentioned. And just the production is just sublime. It's one of those songs where you put headphones on and like you feel like you're floating listening to it. It's just an absolutely beautiful song. Steel and Glass, this track's kind of like a rewrite of How Do You Sleep. It very much sounds like that song. But yeah, I actually think it's a really good track. I think John did a great job with it. I like the vocals on it. John delivers a really very, very emotive vocal. So I think it's really well done. And then as Reilly mentioned, Nobody Loves You When You're Down and Out. This is a really pretty melancholic ballad. Great production on this one. And it's another highlight of the album, in my opinion. And I think it's a great way to kind of wrap up the album. So Walls and Bridges overall, really strong album. Like some of the other albums I mentioned, there may be a couple tracks on here I don't really come back to, but for the most part, I think it's a really strong album, and I think it's one that's really overlooked a lot, even by people that are big John fans. So this is one I definitely recommend giving a full listen if any of our listeners haven't heard it in its entirety yet. So that's my thoughts.
I forgot to mention Steel and Glass. When I was looking at the track listing on the back, I didn't see it. That's another great song I really like from it.
Yeah.
And Old Dirt Road. Like I said, there's like most of the album is like 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 songs, but then you have like those 4 10 out of 10 standouts. And it's one of those things like you got to think like most of the Beatles, if they like were still together in the 70s and they put these songs together on an album, those would be like classic albums. They kind of need, I feel like despite as strong as these efforts are, if they were all together, they would be incredible.
Yeah.
My next one, this is like I kind of said with 33 and a third, I don't know, or not. Yeah, that one, and like how there was a step up in quality. This is my next jump in quality to like these next 4 are like 10 out of 10 albums for me. And the next one I want to talk about is, hold on, Imagine by John Lennon. This is similarly to Walls and Bridges. It's like 8 out of 10 songs, but like now it's like 9 out of 10 songs, and then there's like 5 10 out of 10s. There's just a couple of things that kind of hold this back. Most of the songwriting on this is absolutely incredible. Oh My Love, Jealous Guy, and then obviously the title track Imagine, which again I don't listen to it much. I do agree it's overplayed, but that does not make, and there's no drop in quality because of that. Oh My Love is probably my standout track from here, and Jealous Guy. Crippled Inside is really great. Oh Yoko's cool. Give Me Some Truth is a bit political, but the groove on there is definitely still there, and it's definitely still enjoyable. But then, like, How Do You Sleep? I understand the appeal in it and how it's supposed to be like a dig at Paul, but I can't say I listen to it too much. And How is just it's solid. These are all great songs, but the highlights on here are so fucking good. Oh My Love, the title track. I would actually put Give Me Some Truth there too. And I know it's like super political, but it's really groovy. And Jealous Guy, just great songwriting from John. And it was definitely, I feel like the highlights on here are better than anything on not Imagine, Plastic Ono Band. But I don't think the consistency is quite there, which kind of holds it back from reaching that kind of status. But that being said, I think I do put this record on a bit more than Plastic Ono Band, just for the fact that there's just some incredible standouts. And I like the stripped back style. I feel like his songwriting from the White Album evolved and kept going, and then you got to this record, and it's like, this is I'm So Tired and Sexy Sadie on steroids.
Yeah. Oh My Love is an example of a song that's like super stripped back, but yet it's simple, yet it works. Like, it's just beautiful, and I'm glad that it is so stripped back, because I think it makes it more of an emotionally moving track. What else am I going to say about that album? I guess that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of already hit the nail in the coffin with most of the stuff I wanted to say, so I was really just grabbing for words that I could.
Oh, I know what I was going to say. I learned recently reading a little bit about this album that Give Me Some Truth, apparently that middle 8 section, like the dun, 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 apparently Paul wrote that, because this song was started in 1969 when the Beatles were still together, and I guess John kind of half-heartedly admitted that Paul wrote the bridge on that. So I thought that was kind of an interesting little fact there.
Yeah, but the stripped back sound, oh my God, like John strives with that.
For sure. All right, so moving on to the 7th album in my top 10, we're going back to Wings, and this is the final Paul McCartney or Wings album in my top 10. This is Venus and Mars from 1975. So if you listened to our top 10 non-Beach Boys album episode, you already kind of heard some of my thoughts on Venus and Mars. But in case you didn't, I'll kind of repeat. So this album, I think it's a really strong record. I know most people consider Band on the Run to be Wings' strongest album. But personally, I actually find myself coming back to this one more, just because I love the overall, the band sound on this. You got Jimmy McCulloch's awesome guitar playing. And a lot of these tracks I feel are really elevated by him. I think of tracks like Letting Go, which has this really awesome guitar riff on it. That sounds really good. Medicine Jar is a great song that Jimmy McCulloch wrote that really rocks, really shows his potential as a songwriter. I wish that he was able to contribute more songs and it stayed in Wings longer, because I really would have liked to see what he could have done, because I think this is a really great track. Lovin' Song is a beautiful ballad from Paul. Magneto and Titanium Man is a really fun track. Goofy lyrics, but really fun track. Also sounds really awesome on Wings Over America as well. Listen to What the Man Said was the big hit single from this album, and you can see why it was a hit single. It's really catchy and melodic, fun lyrics, and great track from Paul. And then I think I mentioned on our album episode, but Treat Her Gently, Lonely Old People is a beautiful ballad. It's one of my votes for the most underrated Wing songs. I think it's just absolutely beautiful. Kind of one of those like multi-part songs where it has two distinct parts. But I just really love it a lot. I like the vocal delivery and I like the lyrics. They come off as just very heartfelt. So overall, this is a great album. I think it does deserve more attention. I think Band on the Run kind of overshadows this one for a lot of people. But when you look at the track list from start to finish, I think it's really strong. So Venus and Mars is the seventh album on my list.
Yeah, that was pretty close to making mine. I really like Venus and Mars. I really like the opening two tracks. They kind of like, don't they mesh together?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really wish Paul did a little bit more of that, especially if he kept on with like the rock show theme, but it's still a pretty good record. And Letting Go is a fucking incredible song.
For sure.
Let's go. Isn't that written by Danny Lee?
No, that's a Paul track.
Oh.
But again, it's one of those ones, one of the multiple tracks on Venus and Mars that, like, I will say it does rip pretty hard on Wings Over America. So I have to say that I prefer the Wings Over America version of that one. Same thing with Rock Show as well. I prefer the Wings Over America version. But again, there's a lot of great tracks on here, and quite a few of them that I love aren't even on Wings Over America. So I still love this album. So.
All right. Oh, fuck. Number 3 is the one that came right before Imagine. This is Plastic Ono Band. I kind of already talked about it. I feel like this one, I know what I said with I like an album with highlights that I can remember when it comes to like All Things Must Pass, but I think this might be the sole exception to that, where every song kind of blends together, but it's so like gut wrenching and emotional that it kind of works. And then there's also songs like Hold On, where it's like, hold on, John. That song, the guitar sound on that is incredible, and also a cookie. But that's a really great song. It's kind of John continuing the songwriting that he was doing with the White Album and with Let It Be. Even though we had those two weird ass albums with Yoko in like late 60s, this is like John's next step in songwriting, and I really like it. It's just such an emotional record, a very depressing record. Kind of reminds me of Pink Floyd's The Wall in many ways. And then like the whole like God as a concept, all that shit. Like, I know it's like I'm 14 and this is deep, but it's not like Taylor Swift where it's annoying. It's like actually just it has actual emotion in there instead of just being like a soulless pop record. And I really love it. Mother is such a sad song, but it's just still so great. Like I said, Hold On John is that's probably the highlight for me. Is Working Class Hero is like the first one I actually remember listening to from this record. It's like, again, it reminds me of Bob Dylan a lot, but instead of it being like energetic politically, it's like, dude, this whole album is just fucking depressing. But that being said, great, incredible songwriting. And next to Hold On, the easy highlight for me is Isolation. Just slow, draining, and like depressed, but incredible songwriting. Great album from John. It took me a while for me to really get into this one, but knowing where John was in his life at this point, a lot of the songwriting makes sense. After the Beatles, he just seemed very lost, and it's a great album though. Definitely worth the listen. You got to listen to it all the way through. Best part of the song or the album, Cookie.
Yeah, the highlights on Plastic Ono Band are just unbelievable. A couple of my other favorites on there. I love the song Love. I think that's an absolutely beautiful ballad. Again, very stripped back, it's just like piano, but I just think it's absolutely beautiful. And then also, as you mentioned, Isolation. And I also love the track Look at Me, which has kind of that like Julia style guitar playing on it with the acoustic guitar. Kind of reminds me of that track from the White Album. But it's just a really beautiful track. And the highlights on there are just phenomenal. So I think it's great.
And something that's really I forgot to mention was his vocals on this album absolutely rip. I know he was doing like scream therapy at this time, so it's kind of seems like every song has twist and shout level of like John vocals. But yeah, I feel like even though like the songwriting was depressing, the production of the stripped backness was awesome, and then like the actual instrumentation is incredible from him. and it
Yeah.
sounds so clear. It sounds like sonically it's just great, even though
Right.
it's just guitar, bass, drums, piano. That's it.
Right. Yeah, his vocal on Isolation in particular is like amazing.
Yeah. I feel like this one and Imagine go hand in hand. Like this is like the epic songwriting. Just there's clear standouts, but this is like one of the most consistent albums I've ever listened to, and I really can't go with listen to one and not listen to other ones from the other. I feel like this was like a double album, greatest album ever made.
All right, so the eighth album in my top 10, we're going back to George Harrison. This is another album that Reilly's already talked about, 33 and a Third. So this album, it's really a fun and upbeat sounding album from George. And I think kind of as Reilly had mentioned, a lot of George's albums don't really sound like this. A lot of his albums are much more kind of like, you have the really spiritual and deep lyrics, very kind of serious sounding songs. Whereas this one, George just sounds like he's having a lot of fun. And I think that's kind of the appeal of this album. The production on this album, it's really slick and smooth. I know some people kind of consider that like a detriment, but I personally really like it. I think the album sounds great sonically. In terms of the highlights on here, there's quite a few that I really love on here. But some of the ones for me, Beautiful Girl, I think this is a really gorgeous track. I love the guitar playing on it. The lyrics are really heartfelt. I believe he wrote them about Olivia, who he just recently gotten with around the time of this album. So that's a really great track. This song, as Reilly mentioned, really fun, upbeat song. I love the piano playing on it, the horns. And as you mentioned, it's kind of poking fun at the whole My Sweet Lord copyright infringement thing. But it's done in a really fun way. And I don't know if you've ever seen the music video for that one, but it's a lot of fun as well. You can tell George had a good time with this one, even though, the whole lawsuit thing was kind of a mess. It's What You Value. This is a track I don't really hear a lot of people talk about, but I really like this one a lot. I think it's super catchy, kind of fun lyrics about like, materialistic things and like having a fancy car or having a truck. And it's just kind of a fun song. So I really like that one a lot. I think the melody on it is great. I also really love, I know you mentioned this one as well, Reilly. True Love, I think is a really great cover, really fun, catchy song. And then this album closes really strongly with Pure Smokey, which is a really beautiful track that I believe was dedicated to Smokey Robinson, who was a big influence on George. This song is just super smooth and slick. I love the keyboard playing on it and the guitar, just super smooth guitar playing from George. It's honestly one of my favorites on the album. It's definitely a deep cut, but I think it's a really good one. And then the closer, Learning How to Love You, is just absolutely gorgeous. I think it's a beautiful ballad. I think it's one of the best ballads of George's solo career. And that acoustic guitar solo in the middle, just sublime, just absolutely gorgeous. So it might actually be my favorite track in the album, Learning How to Love You. I think it's just absolutely beautiful. So overall, I think this is a really fun listen, start to finish, 33 and a Third. There's a couple of tracks I used to not be too crazy about. I used to not be too nuts about Women Don't You Cry For Me. And surprisingly, for some people, Cracker Box Palace used to not do much for me. But both have grown on me quite a bit. I do come back to them now. The only track I would say on here I'm not too fond of is Dear One, just because it feels a little long and repetitive. But I do like the keyboard playing on it. It kind of has that Love You, like Moog sound on it, but I don't think it's one of the stronger tracks. So, but overall, it's a really fun album. Again, it's overshadowed by some of George's more critically acclaimed albums. But if you're looking for more of a fun and upbeat, kind of like joyous sounding album from George, this is one of the first ones that I would recommend. So that's the eighth album in my top 10.
You want to talk about music videos? Talk about the Cracker Box Palace music video.
That's a fun one too.
I remember watching like my like one of the weird things I remember from that album is like watching that video while playing Minecraft. I don't know why. I think I was
That's
like
so
that was back before I had Spotify or Apple Music, so I just like listen to music on YouTube, and then like I remember just like I don't know exactly what I was doing in Minecraft. I think I was just like building a house, and then I remember like that video popped on. I was like, oh, what's this?
That's funny.
So moving from one George album to the next, my number 2 favorite album of the solo career is All Things Must Pass. Yeah. Objectively speaking, this is quite easily the best Beatles solo album. I don't think it's really much of a contest. I think maybe Plastic Ono Band, and if you're a Paul fan, like Band on the Run could probably match up to this, but like no. It's just he had like 50 to 60 songs written between 1964 and 1969. And he used the best of those songs to make a double album. Really hard to beat. I'd Have You Anytime is a great song. Him and Bob Dylan wrote that. My Sweet Lord, I mean, say what you will about whether he stole it or not, it's still an unequivocal banger. Wah Wah is probably my favorite song on the entire album. And Isn't It a Pity has two versions. I'm not sure the difference between them. I only really listen to one or the other. I don't really know the
The
difference.
first one is much longer. First one's like 7 minutes. Second one is shorter.
Yeah, you see, you have to have giant balls to put the same song on the album twice. But George still did
It's
it.
a good,
What
yeah,
is Life is one of the songs that really benefited from Spector's production. I can't
yeah,
imagine a stripped back version of that song. And like the horns, the guitar, absolutely incredible.
yep.
If Not For You and Behind That Locked Door, both good songs, but I don't really listen to them too much. Let It Down is incredible, like you said. And one of my other favorite songs from the album is Run of the Mill.
Mm,
I really love that one. The demo is also great. But I don't really care. It's just that's just great songwriting, great lyrics. I really love it. I really love the acoustic guitar with it. George really cooks when he has an acoustic guitar on a song.
mm.
Beware of Darkness is really sweet, but I gotta admit, I don't listen to it too much, but it's still a great song. I could go without Apple Scruffs. And one of the other highlights, like one of the 15 highlights from this album is Ballad of Sir Frankie Crisp, Let It Roll. Absolutely incredible. Such a sweet song. Waiting on You All, again, I don't really listen to that one much, but it's still a solid effort. Like I feel like the worst songs on here would probably be some of the best songs on another George Harrison record. Um, and All Things Must Pass is just an absolute classic. And I don't really listen to side four too much. Can't say I have. Um, that being said, it's like some of the worst songs on here are just still great songs on their own. It's just they are overshadowed by like the behemoths of My Sweet Lord, Wah Wah, What Is Life, Run of the Mill. It's there. I don't think there is a bad song on this album except for the Apple disc, but even that, it's still like just jams. Um,
Right.
so it's a behemoth of an album. It's one of the all-time greats. To think that all these songs were just locked away for like 5 or 6 years is nuts. There's everything that has been said about this album has been said. I'm not adding anything new to the conversation. I'm just saying which ones are my favorite. So highlights: My Sweet Lord, Wah Wah, What Is Life, Ballad of Sir Frankie Crisp, Run of the Mill, and a bunch of others.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal album. I mean, it's just excellent.
I was just gonna say it's unfair to George how like this album like overshadows everything else he did. But to be fair,
Yeah, that's the one. It's one of those things. Yeah, it's like a double-edged sword, right? Because it's like it's a great album. It's one of the greatest albums of all time. But as a result, it's kind of like the Beach Boys with Pet Sounds. Everybody's like Pet Sounds, But it's like there's other amazing albums in their catalog as well. So it's very kind of a comparable thing there. I feel.
yeah.
All right, so the ninth album in my top 10, we're going to another George Harrison album. We're going to George Harrison's Self-Titled from 1979. So as I mentioned in our top 10 non-Beach Boys album episode, this is one of my favorite solo Beatles albums. I really love the chill, laid-back vibe of this album. I think it's just a really happy sounding album as well. I'm always put in a good mood whenever I listen to it. I know George was in a really happy place at this time. He just had his first kid with Olivia, and he just got married, so it was a really happy time for him. You can really hear that in the music on this album as well. I love the production on it as well. It was produced by George and Russ Titleman, and it has a really smooth, slick, kind of late 70s soft rock sound. But I think the musicianship on here is really good. Some of the highlights, Love Comes to Everyone is one of my favorite songs of all time by anybody. It's just such an uplifting and happy track. I love the guitar playing on it from George and Eric Clapton. Great keyboard playing from Steve Winwood as well. Just a really happy track. One of my favorite album openers ever. Not Guilty is a cool track. Kind of a haunting vibe to it with some cool keyboard playing and guitar playing from George. Blow Away is another really happy and uplifting track. I know this was a single from the album, and it's just a really happy, really, really happy song. Dark Sweet Lady and Your Love Is Forever are both really beautiful ballads. I believe Dark Sweet Lady was written for Olivia, and Your Love Is Forever is just one of those beautiful, like spiritual sounding songs that George did so well, and I just think it's really beautiful. Soft Touch is an underrated ballad as well, really pretty track. And If You Believe, the closer, is a really fun track as well. Kind of a more upbeat sounding song, but I think it closes the album really well. So overall, I think it's a really strong album start to finish. Does it reach the same heights as All Things Must Pass? No, in my opinion at least. But I think overall, though, start to finish, is one of those albums that's like short but sweet. It's not too long. The runtime isn't too long. It's not too short. It's like right at the right length for what it is, which is a really enjoyable and melodic, happy, uplifting soft rock album. So I really enjoy this one. I think it's one that people should check out if they like All Things Must Pass and want to hear some more of George's solo material. So that's the ninth album on my list.
And it's not because it came out in 1979 too, but it reminds me a lot of LA.
Yeah, with the production especially that very
Yeah.
kind of, but that's not a detriment.
Smooth.
I
No,
think
no, not at all. It helps both of those albums. I love the smooth, like sweet guitar tones that you get, like the slide guitars, and then it sounds so smooth. That's the best way I can describe it.
yeah, for sure.
All right. My favorite Beatles solo album. I'm gonna get absolute fucking shit on for this. I know I am. It's Double Fantasy. Uh,
Interesting.
yeah, yeah. I gotta defend myself with this one. First of all, this was like one of the first albums I really connected with on an emotional level. I listened to this one my senior year of high school. It was a very, just like starting over was like a very like fitting song for that period of my life, just going on from high school, especially after all like that COVID shit. And I remember like that's like the only song I've ever cried to ever. It's just like starting over. And it wasn't because of high school. I don't know why I just cried to it. But I feel like John Lennon's life at this point was kind of like damage and trauma after damage and trauma, and then finally, like around 75, he finally reached inner peace. He had a new son. He's finally reconnecting with Julian on a better level. He finally like became the person he wanted to be, and it was just kind of like a new period in his life, and he finally had a chance to like feel good and not like he reached peace. And then right after that, he got it taken away from him, which is really heartbreaking. But that being said, you can hear it in all the songwriting from him. Just like starting over is a great tribute to Buddy Holly, Elvis, Gene Vincent. Cleanup Time is such a groove. I really like that one. Beautiful Boy is a very, looking back, it's very sad, but I don't think that was his intention with it. It was about Sean. And I also think about Julian a little bit too. Watching the Wheels is another unequivocal, biblically great song. Woman is so good. The chord progression is great on that one. I know that's like your favorite Beatles solo album track, right?
Yep, that's top 2 or 3.
Dear Yoko is also really great. I really love that one. I love he's kind of using like a Buddy Holly voice on it. And it's just like super upbeat and happy. And that's pretty much it for the John songs. But I think that the John songs are probably the best songs he ever wrote in his career, period. They're up there with In My Life, Strawberry Fields for me, especially just like starting over Woman and Watching the Wheels. But even Cleanup Time is really groovy. I love it. And Beautiful Boy, like these are the best songs John ever wrote in his career. That's my argument for it. And then there's the Yoko stuff. I actually like it. I don't think it's like anything incredibly great. I don't think it's up there with John's like songwriting on here, but Yes, I'm Your Angel actually has like a pretty sweet vibe to it, and I actually like Yoko's vocal over it. Kiss 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 reminds me a lot of the B-52s, and I'm a B-52s fan. I feel like this production style with like the new wave influences of what John was listening to around this time actually benefited Yoko's work way more than it should have. I'm not a big Yoko fan. I don't like anything else she's done, but I feel like the stuff she put on here is pretty damn good. And similarly to like Surfer Girl for me from the Beach Boys, it's the 10 out of 10 songs, which there's like 7 of them, bring up the quality of the Yoko stuff. And the way that it goes back and forth really creates a vibe and energy that I really like. And especially knowing John's place, this part of John's life where he finally had peace, I feel like it actually increases the way I actually listen to like Yoko stuff, and I can actually appreciate it a bit more. It's called Double Fantasy, not Single Fantasy. But that being said, this album holds a really big place in my heart. Incredible songwriting from John. I listened to it at a pretty pivotal moment of my life, changing from high school to college. And I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit of a sentimental guy, but this is my favorite Beatles solo album. Everything John did on here, 10 out of 10. There's not a single song that is less than a 10 out of 10, even Cleanup Time.
One track I don't think you mentioned that I also really love from that album, I'm Losing You, is awesome as well. That's a really great track. Cool guitar playing on that. So that's another good one from John. Yeah, that album, I've seen some people kind of slag it off a bit because of the production on it, which I think is kind of weird because I actually think the production suits the material really well. I know that like there are some stripped back mixes out of songs like Woman.
Oh yeah, they're so fucking good.
And they do sound really good, but like I don't think that the production on the album is a detriment to the songwriting. No. I think that the song's well. I think it's really smooth, and I just think it's a really, like you said, the John songs on that album are just top tier. And I'm not somebody that like is like a Yoko hater or anything, but I do wish the remaining tracks were John tracks because if they were up to the quality of the John tracks that are on there already, this would be a top 5 Beatles solo album for me. So
It's already number one, but if I could change one thing, it would be the Yoko songs. I know
yeah.
I defended them, and I do appreciate some of them, especially "Yes, I'm Your Angel." That's actually on my John Lennon playlist. Is "Yes, I'm Your Angel," and even though I think part of the experience is listening to the Yoko stuff and just getting the whole like John as a house husband experience. um, if you added the John tracks from this one and you added them with this, that would be again. I know I already said the greatest album of all time would be Imagine and yeah, Plastic Ono Band, but this is the only one that would beat it if you add the John stuff from these two records and put them into one album. I do want to talk about this a little bit, but when we get to honorable mentions, I'll do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I hold a lot. A lot of this is just my emotional attachment to the album. I'm gonna be honest, but if I had to give it like any like objective merits, it's the John's shit is so fucking good. And the stripped back mixes, those are also on my John playlist, but I have both albums just together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't really care which version I'm listening to. The songwriting is so strong that the production doesn't really matter for me. It's kind of like Love You, where you have like some oddball production, but the songs are so fucking good.
Right.
It's really hard to beat genuinely great songwriting.
All right. So the 10th and final album in my Beatles solo top 10. We're going 3 in a row. George Harrison here. We're going to wrap it up with Cloud 9 from 1987. Another album that Reilly mentioned already. So this was George's first solo album in nearly 5 years. It had been 5 years since he released, I believe, was Gone Troppo in 1982. So he'd been on a bit of a hiatus from music. And he came back with this album. And as Reilly mentioned, it's a really strong record. It was co-produced by Jeff Lynne, who also co-wrote some of the tracks on here as well. And as we mentioned, don't let the album cover fool you because this album is full of really catchy, really enjoyable and melodic songs. I think the production from Jeff Lynne is really great as well. So some of the highlights for me, I feel like me and Reilly are kind of on the same page in terms of highlights on this album. Cloud 9, the opener, is an awesome track. Really cool, bluesy, kind of funky sounding track. I really like that one a lot. That's What It Takes was co-written by Jeff Lynne. I think that's a really strong second track as well. Fish on the Sand and Devil's Radio, as Reilly mentioned, two just exceptionally catchy and fun songs. I love the riffs on both of them, especially Fish on the Sand. And Devil's Radio has kind of like that fun sing-along vibe during like the verses or the chorus. So I really like that as well. When We Was Fab is a great Beatles-esque track that references George's time with the Beatles, as Reilly mentioned. And that one was also co-written by Jeff Lynne. This Is Love, really catchy, upbeat song, really smooth production on that one. Someplace Else is actually my favorite song on the album. I think it's an absolutely beautiful ballad, very kind of melancholic, sad lyrics, but the track is just absolutely gorgeous, and I love George's guitar playing on it as well. Just a really beautiful track. It's the one I come back to the most on this album. Wreck of the Hesperus, really fun, upbeat track. I really like I guess it's like the middle eight or the bridge section, but I really like the melody on that as well. It's a really cool track. And Got My Mind Set on You. Yes, it's a cover, but it is really fun and catchy. I can see why it was a big hit. I do think it's kind of unfortunate that it overshadows the rest of the album. A lot of people know this is like, oh, that's the album with Got My Mind Set on You on it. But there's a lot of really great tracks on here as well. And I do think that quite a few of them are stronger than that track, which is a cover. But overall, it's still a really fun track. So I think that this is a really strong album overall. There's only like 1 or 2 tracks on here that I'm not that crazy about. Pretty much all the rest I come back to regularly. And I think it's a really enjoyable listen. So, sometimes with these later period albums, some people are skeptical, like, oh, like, is the artist really still writing songs of the same caliber as they once were, like during their prime? But this is an example of an album where, George had released his career masterpieces in like the early 70s with All Things Must Pass and Living in the Material World. And here he comes in the late 80s with a totally different sounding, fun, melodic album that is really strong and enjoyable. So, again, don't judge this album by its cover. It's, the cover does not signify the quality of the music. So overall, Cloud 9 is a really enjoyable album, and it's the final album in my top.
Yeah. I remember when I like first got into like that album, like I think it was like sophomore year of high school.
Mm-hmm.
I remember like I was listening to the Got My Mind Set on You. My mom's like, "Oh my God, I know that one." And I was like, you do? She's like, yeah, I listened to that when I was in high school. I was on the cross country bus, and I was like, listening to the guy my mindset I knew. I'm like, oh, my mom listens to this shit.
I
Nah, but that song is so fucking good.
It is. It's the first one I knew from this album. It's one of the first George solo songs that I knew even before I went, down the Beatles solo rabbit hole.
Oh
So
yeah. But that being said, if it wasn't for my mom, I would not have had the money to get this one. So
I got to get
love
that
you.
one for not just for the music, but yeah, just so I can say I have that handsome cover. So
The guy liked that cover. It's like, oh my god, he looks so cool with his guitar and sunglasses.
it'll be fun to do a recreation of that cover with like Photoshop. That'll be kind of a fun thing.
It'd probably come out better.
Probably. All right, so now me and Reilly, we're going to get into some of our honorable mentions for albums.
Yep.
So albums that maybe just missed our top 10 or ones that we just wanted to shout out a few tracks on. So Reilly, do you want to go first or should I start?
I'll go first. Milk and Honey. I can't defend the Yoko ones on here. But I can defend the John songs. They are very like unfinished compared to what came out. To be fair, these like are the songs that didn't actually make the album cut. It's like, but they're still pretty good. Nobody Told Me is really fun. I'm Stepping Out is like the definition of fun with John Lennon. My favorite is actually Forgive Me, My Little Flower Princess. It's just such a groovy fucking song. And then you also have the demo of Grow Old With Me, which is super heartbreaking, considering like what came before this album's release. Also, the Gatefold. I love Gatefolds. George Harrison 79. That was only an album I recently got into, and it's not like Ram where I heard a couple of songs already. Like I truly did not listen to a single song from it. That being said, I could see it probably making my top 10 at some point in the future. I just have to listen to it more. Mind Games is another one. Oh, holy fuck, let me find it. Mind Games, the song, is actually probably one of my favorite Beatles solo songs, period. And then there's shit, man, I gotta get the track list out. Tight ass.
Yeah.
Uh,
One's kind of whatever.
yeah, I mean, this is one where like I think it's consistently good throughout, but it's not like Walls and Bridges where there's like the consistency. It's just like, and I can name the songs I like. I just have it's just like, so it's all right. Just a couple like standouts, but Mind Games, absolutely incredible. And I've been advertised the hell out of the new mix on Instagram. So there you go.
Yeah.
Did you see the box set for that thing? It's quite literally a box.
I did. Yeah. It sounds like a lot of people seem to like it. So I think they did a good job with that from what I've heard.
Yeah, obviously I'm a big John fan because I own all of his albums. Except for Rock and Roll, which it's all right. I think all the covers are pretty solid, but minus Ain't That a Shame and Stand By Me, I could go without the rest. It's released that as a single. And then there's a whole story with Phil Spector going absolutely bonkers and stealing the masters.
That's like Bruce stealing the tape for Out of the Country.
Just like it. But then there's the Behemoth, and I'm Jake. You're going to talk about this, so maybe I'll just hold off on it. Wings Over America. It's like, I think I told you once, it's like the only Paul McCartney album I'll ever need. And I'm not saying that as like anything to put down Paul's stuff. It's just like once you hear this, I don't listen to any of the other versions of Paul's songs except for maybe like Band on the Run. Absolutely incredible live album. Probably to be fair, there's not much competition. Probably the best live Beatles album, period. I do like the Dark Horse tour that George did. Not Dark Horse. That isn't one of the honorable mentions I wanted to mention was Dark Horse, but the one he did with Eric Clapton in the 90s. Japan. That's a cool live tour. But yeah, I also mentioned Dark Horse is pretty good, but again, it suffers from like a couple of good songs and a couple of forgettable ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. But then there's Ringo, which I only need one album, which is the self-titled. I kind of forgot about him. I'm not gonna lie. No disrespect to Ringo's solo. Actually, massive disrespect to Ringo's solo career. It sucks. It sucks. Self-titled's pretty good, but even then, like I only really like Photograph. What's that other one he did with George?
It Don't Come Easy.
It Don't Come Easy. Certainly does not for Ringo. And Goodnight Vienna is a bop, but Book
Yeah,
of the Blues is like the blues one he did was also like pretty cool. I just don't listen to it much. I respect it more than I actually like it. That's like
well,
the most serious Ringo ever was.
I think with that album, and I think there was another one he did early on. Like it works because he kind of has a voice that's suited to that country style. So I think
Yeah.
that the that kind of album, and also the one I know is mostly covers as well. So actually, both those early Ringo albums might be mostly covers. I have to look that up again. But
Um, Flowers in the Dirt.
yeah,
Also pretty solid. I like the songs she did with Elvis Costello. Like I said, I think Paul works better when he has some sort of collaboration, whether that's in songwriting or production. As long as he has somebody with him that isn't Linda, no disrespect to Linda. It's just like he really strives with a partner in some sort of way, whether it's with Denny
yeah,
Lane on guitar or maybe Elvis Costello when it came to songwriting, somebody to like ground him from doing Admiral Halsey.
and a butter pie. Uh,
Yeah,
which again, we like that song. It's a good song. It's just
right.
like that's the kind of stuff that like the critics would come after Paul
Right.
for. So
Right. He
that's
needs somebody to ground him, otherwise you're gonna have 50 obla di obla das. It's like,
all right, is that it for you, Reilly, or do you have any
yeah,
others?
I mean, we could talk about songs after, but I know you
Yeah.
want to talk about Wings Over America.
All right, so album honorable mentions for me. So I'm gonna mention a couple that Reilly already mentioned. So Mind Games, I will. It is a bit of an inconsistent album, but I do think that the highlights are really good on there. The title track Mind Games is amazing. Again, it's one of my favorite Beatles solo tracks as well. Intuition is a really fun track from that album too. Another one that kind of gets overlooked, but I think it's a lot of fun. I like the lyrics, and John has a fun kind of vocal delivery on it too. And Out of the Blue is a really pretty ballad from that album as well. So definitely some tracks worth checking out on Mind Games. As Reilly alluded to,
Badass.
Wings Over Dead. As Reilly alluded to, Wings Over America is an awesome live album. A lot of really great tracks on here. It's a good mix of both the Wings material with some Beatles tracks scattered in too. I know Paul does songs like Blackbird, The Long and Winding Road, and a few other Beatles tracks, but for the most part, it's a lot of Wings tracks. And a lot of these Wings tracks actually rip and sound a lot better than they do on the studio albums, in my opinion, especially those Venus and Mars and Speed of Sound tracks. I think of songs like Medicine Jar by Jimmy McCulloch. I think that rips really hard on Wings Over America. I think Letting Go is superior on Wings Over America. Overall, I just think it's a really strong live album. It's definitely one of those great like concert albums. Like if you weren't there at the time and you wanted to get the experience, like what was it like to go to a Paul McCartney concert in the mid '70s when like he's at his peak, with Wings. This album really captures that sound. So for that alone, it's really great. It's a great listen. London Town by Wings. This is one I've seen some people slag off. It is a guilty pleasure for me. I kind of like the whimsical lyrics and theme of it. It's kind of a mix of soft rock and kind of like folk rock in a way. I think of songs like Deliver Your Children, which is a really great Denny Lane and Paul co-write. That's a really great track from that album. London Town, the title track, is a really pretty track. Again, kind of whimsical, goofy lyrics, but I do like the song. It's a really pretty melody. Cafe on the Left Bank rocks really hard. I'm Carrying is a really beautiful ballad, really beautiful acoustic track from Paul. And then Girlfriend with a Little Luck, and More Smooth and the Grey Goose, which is a really crazy track that closes the album. It's like a mix of disco and sea shanty. And it kind of works actually. So I do enjoy the track. So that's London Town. I think it's an enjoyable album. I can see why some people don't love it. I won't say it's a perfect album. There's definitely some skips on there for me. But I do think there's a lot to like. Starting over from John Lennon, I won't go too much into it because Reilly already discussed it, but it's a really strong album. The John tracks in particular are really strong. Somewhere in England by George Harrison. This album frustrates me because there's some great tracks on it, like All Those Years Ago, which is a great tribute to John. Life Itself is a really pretty track. And That Which I Have Lost has a really fun guitar lick to it, which I like. But the thing that frustrates me with this album is that there's some really great tracks that were cut from it that Warner Brothers basically rejected, and that George basically had to replace. And yet, I think the tracks that were rejected are stronger than the majority of the material on the album. The tracks that were rejected that I would recommend checking out: Flying Hour, Tears of the World, Sat Singing, and Lay His Head. I think all four of those tracks, had they made the album, I think that they would be considered the strongest tracks on the album, besides maybe All Those Years Ago and Life Itself. I think they're really strong, and it's a shame that they were rejected because I think they're really good. And then lastly, Chaos in Creation from Paul McCartney from 2005. This is another example of an album that comes, a later point in an artist's career, but yet is still pretty strong. Again, as Reilly mentioned, Paul does best when he has collaborators, and in this one, he had, I forgot the guy's name, but it's Radiohead's main producer was collaborating with Paul on this. And basically, what I read was that Paul would write songs, and this guy would actually like tell Paul like, no, that's not good enough. Go back and start over. And that's something that Paul hadn't had for years at this point in his career, like on his previous album.
It was Nigel Godrich.
There you go. That's the name. Yep. So basically, yeah, so Paul had a collaborator in a way, somebody that could tell him like, that's not good enough, or this is a good track. And I think that what resulted from that was a really strong album. Tracks like Fine Line, Friends to Go, which is a tribute to George, and This Never Happened Before. I think these are all really great tracks. And again, it's an album that I think from start to finish is a pretty enjoyable listen. I don't think every track is like a 10 out of 10 by any means, but in terms of later solo Beatles records, I do think this is one of the better ones. So I would recommend giving Chaos and Creation a listen if you haven't ventured beyond like the Beatles solo like 80s stuff. I think this is a good latter day McCartney album.
My brother's a fan of McCartney 3. I don't know why.
That one, there's a couple enjoyable tracks, but I struggle with it just because one, Paul's vocals are really kind of, he obviously, I'm not expecting him to sound like he once did. Obviously the guy is over 80 years old now. But I do kind of struggle with his vocals on there. And the songs, honestly, like there's just not really any standouts in my opinion. I think they all are kind of just like at best or decent, at worst they're just unmemorable. So yeah, I don't think it's the strongest album, and it was kind of ridiculous how much promotion was being done for that when it came out. I think they released like 10 different variants of it and stuff.
And the re-recordings with other artists singing.
That I didn't like that either.
My brother loved it. I don't know why. I don't need like Frank Ocean or whoever the fuck sang on that. I'm thinking of the cover.
Should I flash on the screen again? All right, so now we want to talk about some individual songs we just wanted to shout out that we weren't able to mention other albums?
Absolutely.
All right.
There's a lot of songs I already mentioned. Just like Starting Over, Watching the Wheels and Woman are my top 3 favorite songs in the Beatles solo career. But also obviously like My Sweet Lord, some of the stuff on All Things Must Pass. But some of the songs I didn't mention, what's that one from George Harrison 79 that I really liked?
Blow Away, Love Comes to Everyone.
Love Comes to Everyone is absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, yeah.
I already mentioned Mind Games is an incredible song. There's some from McCartney that I really liked. You spit yours out while I figure mine.
Okay, so I'll start with McCartney's first solo album since you were trying to think of it. Junk is a really great track from that album. I love that one, and I actually, and this might surprise some of our listeners that are familiar with Paul's solo stuff, but I actually come back to Sing Along Junk more. I find it more moving with just the pretty piano playing. I just think it's a really moving song. I also really like Every Night from that album. That's a really great track. And of course, Maybe is on there too. The rest on there I could kind of, do without. I mean, some of it's okay, but for the most part, I don't come back to that album as a whole. From Ringo's self-titled, obviously Photograph and It Don't Come Easy are standout tracks written by George Harrison. Also 6 O'Clock, which I think was written by Paul, is a great track from that album too. From Wildlife. Wildlife is an album that I don't think is one of Paul's best. I think that it's I don't think the songwriting on it is the best. And I think production-wise, it's not the strongest either. It kind of feels a little sloppy in places. But I do really like the track Some People Never Know. I think that's a really pretty track with some really gorgeous harmonies from Linda and I believe Denny Lane as well. So I would recommend that one. From Red Rose Speedway, My Love is a gorgeous song, as well as Little Lamb Dragonfly, which is another one of those kind of multi-part Paul songs. But I really like that one too. From Mind Games, I already mentioned these two, but Intuition is a great track, really fun kind of upbeat song from John. And You Are Here is a really pretty one too, with some really pretty harmonies and just a really pretty melody. From Dark Horse, from George Harrison, there's 2 standouts for me. Simply Shady is a really great track. I really like the lyrics on this one. It's kind of George talking about like kind of like the bad temptations of life and trying to basically avoid them. So I really like that song. Also Far East Man is a really chill vibe from Dark Horse.
That was the one he did with Ron Wood.
Ron Wood.
Far East Man. I was thinking of, I don't know why I thought Sue Me, Sue You Blues. That may have been the one that Ronnie Spector was supposed to sing.
Yes, that was either Try Some Buy. I think that was Try Some Buy Some that Ronnie Spector originally was going to record. I think. George ended up doing it. From Extra Texture, the song "You" is a really pretty soulful song, which is, I believe, maybe another one that they were originally
That was supposed to be one that Ronnie was supposed to sing, if I remember.
Yeah, I think you're right. But George, you can tell that one's a little high for him to sing for sure. Like it's definitely a little above his range, but I still think he does a good job on it. And I think that the arrangement on it is really good. Definitely easily the standout highlight of that album. I don't think that Extra Texture is necessarily one of George's stronger efforts. From Wings of the Speed of Sound, I know Reilly already mentioned these two, but two non-McCartney tracks, Wino Junko from Timin and Time to Hide by Denny Lane, both awesome tracks. Time to Hide on Wings Over America sounds awesome as well, and it has a really great bass line, so I really like that one as well. From London Town, well, I already talked about the London Town track, so let's go on to Back to the Egg. Getting Closer is a really cool rocking song, although some of the lyrics are a little questionable from Paul. I know he's singing about like salamanders and stuff. He has some kind of weird lyrics on that one, but it is a really cool rocking track. Spin It On is a really interesting track from Paul because it's almost like Paul goes punk. Like it's very, very rocking for a Paul song. It's very loud and blaring, and the verses just kind of like really speed along in a way that like you don't really hear another song like this in Paul's catalog of music. So I think he was kind of trying to fit more in with the times in terms of music at that time. And I think it's a really cool track. Old Siamster, really cool track from that album. Some cool keyboard playing and guitar on that one. And Arrow Through Me is a really cool track. Kind of has a very key sound to it. To me, that's one of the standouts from Back to the Egg. And then lastly, a few more from Tug of War. I know some people really like Tug of War. I'm kind of indifferent on it. There's some good tracks, but there's also some that don't do anything for me. I do really like the ballad Wanderlust, though. I think that's a really good song. From Flowers in the Dirt, My Brave Face, which was an Elvis Costello collaboration. That's a really awesome track. I love the melody on that. Such a great chorus and verse. It's just a really great track. From Brainwash, which was the last George Harrison album, which was released after he passed. Stuck Inside a Cloud is a really strong track, as well as Never Get Over You. I think that's a really pretty one, too. And then a couple of miscellaneous Ringo tracks that I wanted to shout out before we wrap up. Wings from Ringo the Fourth. I had to get the Ringo the Fourth mentioned in there. It's a fun track. It's got a cool riff. I believe Ringo re-recorded it over the past 10 years. So I think it kind of tells you that he's proud of that one. I also like Love Song from that album, although that's kind of a guilty pleasure. And then Weight of the World from Time Takes Time is a really strong track. Time Takes Time is probably one of the better of the latter day Ringo albums. Riley, stop shaking your head. Weight of the World is actually a good track, Riley. If you haven't heard that one, I would listen to it. I believe it's.
I'm sure it is.
It is. And Never Without You is a really beautiful track. It's a tribute to George Harrison. I'll be honest, that one actually like moves me more than like a lot of Beatles solo songs. I heard it on the Beatles Sirius station recently, and I almost started tearing up in the car. Like I don't know, there's something about that song that just really moves me.
That's a good one.
Knowing that it was written for George and like, you know, like the lyrics about like your song lives on without you, it just really moves me. So that's about it for me. Again, just a lot of great songs in the Beatles solo catalog. Again, some are more memorable than others, and some aren't even worth checking out. But the highlights are really strong. So, Riley, what do you got for individuals?
All right, Instant Karma. That's another one. Your love shines on. That's such a great hook. I mentioned obviously Plastic Ono Band and Imagine, all of those ones. I mentioned Mind Games and Out of the Blue are both pretty good. Stand By Me is a great cover. It doesn't beat the original, but I really like the approach to it as more of like a sweet song rather than like what could have easily been just like a really Stand By Me, like really rocking song. And they obviously like took it out. And then Borrowed Time, and I already mentioned from Milk and Honey. Forgive Me, My Little Flower Princess is great, and obviously Grow Old With Me. I could almost count Free as a Bird and Real Love, even though those were technically Beatles songs. They were still John's songs at heart. As for George, obviously you have like my Sweet Lord and like the highlights from All Things Must Pass and Cloud Nine, but So Sad, Dark Horse, and Far East Man from the Dark Horse album are pretty good. Love Comes to Everyone, Blow Away, Dark Sweet Lady is absolutely beautiful. Cheer Down, which I'm pretty sure was a
movie soundtrack song. Yeah,
that's a good one that I always like to listen to. Flying Hours, pretty good. You mentioned that one, and obviously All Those Years Ago are great. And Marwa Blues and Any Road. Any Road is absolutely so catchy.
Yeah.
Let's get to Paul. Sorry, I like have to like actually write these down because
I wrote mine down too, so no worries.
I wish I did that beforehand. My Brave Face and Don't Be Careless Love. I'm pretty sure those are the Elvis Costello.
Yep.
Correct. Also worth mentioning is a Paul song. But it was on an Elvis Costello album, Veronica. Great song, very catchy, and then the meaning behind it is absolutely heartbreaking too. Definitely worth a listen. When I saw Elvis Costello live a couple of weeks ago, he actually stripped that song back and played it just on the piano, and it was absolutely beautiful. Every Night and Junk are awesome, but also so is Maybe I'm Amazed. That being said, the Maybe I'm Amazed cover that the Faces did in 19. Well, I don't know. Like I think Rod Stewart's voice fits that song way better than Paul McCartney, but they're two different versions of the song, different styles. But the Faces version is definitely worth a listen. Coming Up is a fucking banger. I remember one of the funny things about John was when he was doing Double Fantasy before he like actually like got into doing the album. The thing that got him into it partly was Paul's Coming Up. He heard Coming Up on the radio. He was like, "Fuck me, that's Paul." I love that story. New from 2013. I know that it's like you can kind of hear like auto tune on it somewhere, I'm sure, but the songwriting is absolutely still there and is a really cool song. Nothing Off the Feed album. So Bad from Pipes of Peace, pretty solid. And Take It Away from Tug of War. Absolute unequivocal banger. And for Ringo, Photograph's pretty good.
It Don't Come Easy.
Yeah. That one's also pretty good. Good Night, Vienna.
You like Never Without You too, right?
Yeah, that song is beautiful. I don't really listen to it much anymore, but
yeah,
I love it when he's like, "Take it away, Eric," and then you get like an Eric Clapton guitar.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool, dude. My hair makes me look like the guy from Echo and the Bunnymen. What the
fuck? Before we wrap up, do we want to share? Do we have a vote for the worst Beatles solo song, or like a bottom 3 or 4?
Anything off Ringo the Fourth?
Yeah, I mean,
a random song.
It's not a good album, but in a way, I enjoy it, like in an ironic sort of way. Like it's Ringo does disco. I mean, there's just something hilarious about that. And I will say, production-wise, I don't think it's the worst. It's just Ringo's vocals does not blend the best with disco. So, I will vote if I had to pick one to be the worst Beatles solo from Paul McCartney from Egypt Station is atrocious and shouldn't have been released. So that's easily it for me. Fuh, F-U-H-U. It's called.
What about the song he did with Rihanna and Kanye?
That doesn't count. He's barely even on that, right?
Yeah, like the story was he like showed up to Kanye and he's like, "I got this song," and he strums it on the guitar. And then when Kanye does it, he takes the guitar part and just like makes it like synth bass. It's like. I think the hook is there. You can tell McCartney had a part in that because the hook is definitely there.
Yeah. For Wings, Cook of the House is the worst Wings song. I don't know why that was put on the album. It's terrible. I know he wanted Linda to sing a song, but he could have given her a better song to work with, and the lyrics are just horrendous. So,
yeah, John Lennon did not release a single album in 1972 at all. Did you know that?
Who?
John Lennon didn't release an album in 1972.
Oh, did he not? So wait, was it?
He went straight from. He went straight from Imagine right into Mind Games. There was no album in between that at all.
Wow, that's interesting.
That's interesting. Yeah, look it up. Look it up. John Lennon album 1972. There's not an album there. Yeah, pretty much. What's the album that Ringo did?
Okay. Yeah, I actually was going to ask you, what are your thoughts on Somewhere in New York City? I guess I know.
There's not an album from 1972 by John Lennon.
I consider myself pretty knowledgeable on the Beatles solo stuff. I did not get what you were talking about for a good 2 minutes there. That tells you how inconsequential that album is to me.
Yeah, no, I actually have every single John Lennon album. Every single John Lennon solo album. Let's run through it real quick. I have Plastic Ono Band. I have Imagine. And I have Mind Games. And I have Walls and Bridges. And I have Double Fantasy. And then I have Milk and Honey. And there's nothing else. I'm not missing a single album. Oh, I'm missing the ones that he did in 1969.
Oh yeah, the two virgins and the wedding album.
Yes. Yeah, I don't have those ones, but those don't count. But I have everything else. And what's that album that Ringo did where he has the mustache and the rose? Stop it,
smell the rose. I will say that one has "Rack My Brain" by George Harrison. That's a catchy little song on there.
Yeah,
special, but
Train Records do an episode on that?
He did Ringo the Fourth, and he mentioned the Stop and Smell the Roses.
I put those two albums together because you have Ringo with the sword, and you have Ringo going like.
Well, I've read that was like Ringo's alcoholic phase, and like he has no recollection of that period whatsoever. Like him about it.
That's his David Bowie Station to Station. He does not remember making that album whatsoever.
Yeah, except the quality difference between those two artists is about.
Station to Station is an all-time. Actually, no. Stop and Smell the Roses is an all-time classic, and Station to Station is a piece of dog shit.
You're pissing off the Rate Your Music gang.
Yeah, I'd take Stop and Smell the Roses over Igor any day.
I'd take it over Neutral Milk Hotel any day.
Fuck that album. That is like the most okay album I've ever listened to. I can't even give you a highlight on that one. It's like it's fine. You know, like Ringo has like all those EPs coming out now.
I know. He said he's done with full-length albums. He just does EPs now. So
Ringo, you should just stop, man. Just retire. He's gonna get 90.
Yeah, he's gonna keep going. He's never gonna stop. Do we want to wrap it up?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So thank you everybody for listening to this second episode of Off Timin'. We hope you all enjoyed the show. It was really fun and interesting to hear Reilly's favorite solo Beatles albums and tracks. And hopefully everybody listening found mine interesting as well.
Found yours interesting, Jake.
Thanks, Reilly. I hope that our discussion helped encourage some of you listening to check out some more of the Beatles solo material, if any of you haven't really dived into the Beatles solo catalog before. So again, the Good Timin' podcast, we are currently on break for the summer, but that break is almost over. We're planning to start our second season in the coming weeks. So there's going to be a lot more Beach Boys discussion and content on the way soon. As always, if you like this episode and want to hear more, feel free to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. We greatly appreciate the support as it motivates us to make more episodes in the future. And also, as a reminder, the podcast is available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So there's plenty of different places to listen and keep up with the show. So thank you again, everyone, for listening. We hope you enjoyed, and we will see you all next time. Bye-bye. Peace and love.
Peace and love.